Though this channel, in respect to music coverage, is mostly registered towards fresh listens, sometimes it's fun to have repeats, especially when there's a bit of a fresh twist to what you've already listened to, so maybe you can give a more informed perspective, perhaps on subsequent listens. And as it happens to be with Bullet for My Valentine, that is exactly the case, because building off of the deluxe release of their self-titled album is this video coming off a bit later for No More Tears to Cry, which I thought on a first impression was a great listen. Again, I've covered that previously, as well as all the other tracks on the deluxe edition, and that was in part not only because I am a massive Bullet for My Valentine fan, I've been for many years, and as a metalhead, of course, that's immediately what I gravitate to in genre, and even more specifically to European talent. They've become quite an interesting point for me to discover not only new talents, but be better familiarized with the artists I've loved for a while. But it wasn't just that brought me in again when I covered the entirety, and I don't oftentimes tend to do entire album-length coverage, it's seldom. But in part that was because of penance, or me paying self-attested penance for not covering the self-titled album in its entirety when it first debuted. Because having listened to that, I wasn't covering music as much on this channel in terms of a wide array of groups at the time of said release. And I was really impressed with it, again, on a subsequent listen, that I'm sitting there in the back of my mind thinking, this would have been perfect for a first impression in terms of this channel. I would have loved to cover the album in its entirety on here and have a first experience with you and sharing my first impressions with the piece, or the collection of pieces overall. But that didn't happen. And so I figured as a compromise, and because I won't repeat same mistakes again, I'm like, well, we got this deluxe edition coming out, 5 more tracks, I'm covering every single one. Wasn't that hard. You know, like I've said, I enjoy this group and I already knew what I was getting in regard to quality. So, didn't take me that long to plan out, yeah, I'm going through with it. And, you know, like I've said, I enjoyed every track on the album. Stitches being my favorite in regards to the deluxe edition release, is still that track really is so potent for me. Not only in its delivery on music, but also just the personal touch that song had in my life. Which music, you know, I've said before, is one of my favorite art forms for me. It's the one I'm more inclined to entertain. Aside from other entertainment ventures, perhaps of what I found at this channel on art forms I continue to consult to this day, music for me really is the beloved choice out of all of them. But for me, you know, Stitches was a track that, like many songs can be, has that real cathartic nature, and it just spoke to me so beautifully of where I've been in my life, that maybe that was the primary track that comes off as the best in regard to the deluxe releases. But No More Tears to Cry was a good backup. Great delivery in regards to the music, and I thought the lyrical construction as well was quite engrossing. Perhaps I would say to the level of Stitches, in my opinion. And on more listens of what I've given it, it's even proven it would be a better track, even maybe than a first impression would have consulted. Even though I loved it when I first covered it immediately, it's definitely built up an appreciation like many of our Bullet for My Valentine songs have. But we have a bit of a breath of fresh air in consulting this track today with a music video a bit later. But you know, they haven't really done as many music videos on this album per se. They've done more in the way of visualizers. So it's nice to have it. They've done a couple in terms of the music video, like with Parasite, but we have a compliment here to give No More Tears to Cry a bit more of a dimension. I'm going to go ahead and cue the video up, and perhaps for some of you, you've not had an introduction to Bullet for My Valentine yet, or maybe even more specifically, No More Tears to Cry. I hope this song is as engrossing for you as it was for me on a first impression, and I hope we enjoyed the video together. Like, I'm really excited to, again, get a new perspective on the song, and to entertain it again, because it really is such a beautiful piece. If you're not familiar with the way I format my music coverage on this channel, I try and suit audience taste to the best extent that I can. And so if you're somebody that likes to read along with the message of the piece, I will of course have the video pulled up, and that'll be accompanied by the song, but I will also provide you with the lyrics in the video. They'll track along with the piece as we proceed through it, and you can read along with the message, which, again, on this song, I'm going to try and keep it as simple as I can because I've already covered the track in depth. But you know, sometimes you gain more of an insight upon subsequent listens. And I've had some more insightful discoveries on this track because I've given it more time to breathe. But let's watch this for ourselves and get a new perspective and dimension even beyond what we've heard thus far and experienced. And it's such a good simple opening, by the way, in regards to the rougher side. It's trademark Bullet, and I love the opener on this, as well as pretty much all the tracks in regards to music on this album. They're all so good. I love the structure of this opening, by the way, the strumming. We're going to talk about this a lot more, because I didn't mention some of these points in the first video. Ew. Not a Bug fan. Okay. I've been unnerved. Such a beautiful song, though. Like I said, this is just right along the lines of what I love of them. Trademark sound from them. Established very well. I love the structure of its arrangement so much. I mean, this is a particular talking point I want to produce in the second stage of this video. Love it. And great visual component, too, to add on. Very severe and troubling. I really love it. You'll forgive me if I look at this guy and I see Ezra Miller. It almost looks like him in a casting. I know it's not. It looks a lot like Ezra, though. His doppelganger. Okay. Interesting. Some visual effects to boot, too, to add on some dimension to this work. Even though it's already good enough on its own. And so far the video's been kind of fun. Just even as merely as a performance session. The heart to this piece is just beautiful. I mean, again, it's some would say it's as good as Stitches, but it's like it's a really good compliment. It's like right up there in terms of the relevance to its grounded emotions. I always love listening to Matt's his name, right? Frontman. Distinctive voice. I mean, again, I have a real soft spot for European rock artists in the metal scene as well. I'm always enamored by this talent, even though maybe in context of some other groups, Bullet for Valentine's a much longer established name and is not necessarily maybe in the territory of this channel as much in regard to first introductions I've had along the way, and I've had plenty with Europeans, but I absolutely love this group. And this track beautifully fits in the scope of the entire album. If you consider the standard edition coupled with the deluxe, I mean, in that case, let's just say the deluxe for simplicity's sake, all the tracks are there, including the standard release. This album has been one of my favorites. Now, not only returning to Bullet's roots, I really feel, again, we took a bit of a deviated path with Gravity. As good as that album is, there's a lot more of a softer presence in the articulation of those tracks that I wanted to return to, that harder, guttural, aggressive sound that Bullet for Valentine established in the beginning. I do feel this album harkens back to the roots of the band quite well. But the emotional frets on every track, they're deeply sensitive works. And that's what I love about, not just music in general, but it has that cathartic nature. And it's in that respect that I've absolutely gravitated towards music in my own life. I said before, for simplicity's sake, music, when I've been dealing with issues in my own life, has been closer to me than people have. There's that cathartic healing side to it. It's a practical aid that I think people just reach to. People, especially when you're considering metal always addresses sentimental themes for the most part. Maybe some metal tracks are more for like entertaining listens, but there's an avenue, and this is part of the reason I love metal so much, even though I will tell you, my music taste, I've said this many times, not just in respect to Europeans, but my music taste do put me in more of an isolated space in my real life, and I don't have that many connections with my peers in regards to the music that I enjoy. In particular, a lot of people don't like metal. But for me, again, it's that healing nature of what metal provides and the openness of certain topics and discussion that I don't find in many other types of genres. I just don't. I mean, sometimes you might have a song that tries to express itself in a healing manner, but I don't oftentimes see the potency or the bluntness and really the connection, as beautifully expressed as I do within the metal world. And this track, like all other 14 pieces on this album, beautifully reaches to the heart of a listener. And Bullet for Valentine is obviously very expert at this in regard to what I've heard off of that main release. This track, even though, like I said, Stitches was the one, and I'm not going to go into big spiel on Stitches, because I spent like nearly 40 minutes talking about the work when I consulted it. You can consult that video if you want to hear my take on it. It really is like one of the most beautiful pieces, but the way that it touched me was deeply personal. And I would imagine this is going to be a shared emotion for many of you if this is a first introduction to No More Tears to Cry, or if you've heard the song before, I'm sure that's the way it's impacted you, as the lyrics have manifested its vision. I have to say that in terms of subsequent listens, this track has really built an adoration in not only the bluntness of the message, again, how it fits best in terms of stressing an emotional story, but marrying tone of lyrics to the tone of the music and the structure of the piece from, again, a musical perspective, and variating within that to mimic a concept. Like I said, it's the strumming section and key balanced with the more aggressive when Matt jumps back into the wait, those sections. I love that jump, by the way. It's a perfect transition, very abrupt. But the way it mimics the scene of what a song is talking about, which in general, you could extrapolate it many different ways. But I'm going to take the focus of, because of certain cue words in particular, let's say from the really blunt lines, after the first wait, where there's explicit depictions of self-destructive tendencies. Like, will this rope around my neck? Evoking maybe a feeling of self-destruction, suicidal behavior. That's what I immediately think of. And again, it's a graphic illustration to portray, but many people tragically process that, in regards to life's challenges and obstacles. I mean, no one promised that life would be pretty, right? And I'm not saying that's an excuse at all, but it's horrible when people go through, emotional challenges like that. I myself, though, I've not necessarily, I can't say I was ever suicidal. Everybody sometimes deals with, negative emotions, and sometimes you perhaps consider your purpose and your life circumstances and the trouble you're encountering. You try to best deal with it, and it's hard. It's a challenge, as again, when you hit a bad spot in life, whether it be from maybe choices you made or maybe other people. In my life, it's a balance of both. So while I can't necessarily say it's of direct relevance in regards to the imagery, there are people that I'm in the circles of people that knew people that, unfortunately, some have lived to tell, their stories. Others horrifically have not. It's a deeply resonant and passionate theme. The way that the song explores that sentiment, though, it astounds me, and the consideration I've given it, how beautifully it tells this story in its music. When let's say again, for the context of a situation, to portray a certain example, and maybe this is a bit of a familiar example to use, I'm trying to find one that maybe everybody could imagine. Let's say you have a kid who's dealing with self-destructive emotions or perhaps tendencies and behavior it's a result of bullying in school. That kid is going to be, more than likely, maybe not always, but there are certain situations where that kid might feel safe, and situations perhaps where that kid, again, in the context of the bullying part, where that kid would feel a sense of danger and dread and anxiety and trouble, and the obstacle that would produce, again, perhaps those self-destructive emotions, or the emotions that might entail that behavior. The way that the song pictures that energy in its environment, the shift in the energy is key. So when the song begins, of course, you have that rough opening, and then Matt immediately launches into this guitar ballad, just with an independent strum, and the lyrics themselves mimic a more contemplative perspective of somebody like processing their thoughts. The way I see it, that verse is sort of like you're in that space of safe consideration, right? That you're maybe, let's say, this kid, for example, in terms of hypothetical, is let's say that they have a close relationship to their family. They feel safe there. Or they have a close relationship, maybe a certain friends group, or perhaps in their own solitude. Let's say they feel like they're at their best in their room, where they can truly think about where they're at and get in touch with their emotions in a positive manner. where they don't feel, again, a sense of challenge or dread. For example, as I say, in contrast, the academic study, I'll touch on that in a minute, because again, I'm trying to show a transition here. But when you have, let's say, the setting that is, in consideration, example, safe, right? It has a much softer presence. It doesn't feel as harsh. The song mimics that in the strumming of the guitar. It's much more sentimental, more ballad-like. And then you have the lyrics as well that kind of mimic that pattern, like someone's thinking through where they are, right? And just reconciling those emotions. And then there's a shift with the wait, those verses, where it takes on a more aggressive tone, like somebody is in danger. And the lyrics mimic that. Notice the change in bluntness, right? We go from a little more contemplative and a little more psychological and emotional to blunt descriptions. I don't know if this was, by the way, intended by the band, or I might just be reaching here in my own regard of the piece, but it's really interesting to investigate even perhaps just a coincidental structure. It's just fascinating to me. But you have to switch into the more aggressive. So let's say perhaps if you're considering an environment, maybe this is when said kid enters school, right? Now they're right in the presence of those who are bullying him. So he or she is at more of a vulnerable position. And they feel, again, that sense of dread and trouble, like, oh no, I don't know what to expect, right? And that's perhaps when those emotions come on that might entail the self-destructive behavior. I'm not saying maybe that'll always be the result in real life, but for some it might be. Right? It might be that bullying and that incessant trouble and challenge that might damage disrupt the kids' emotions to a point where they don't feel safe. And they're like, I don't want to be in this environment, but they're going to feel more anxiety. The song mimics that so well in its tone. I'm astounded again by the structure of it. If that was indeed the intention of Bullet, they wildly succeeded in this, because it's such a beautiful compliment to picture that change of environment. And it's not even, again, I see that marriage between tone of music and lyrical constructions in picturing a concept. Maybe a good recent example, actually, like, let's say, for example, it's long been promised on my channel, but I finally got through it. Longtime favorite band of mine, the American scene, Demon Hunter. I've been a fan for like 12 years. I just finished covering Exile in its entirety, and there are like 3 tracks on that album that I remember listening to, and I mentioned this point, that they all have a certain association between tone of song and lyrical construction with the concept of the piece. It's something I see on rare occasion, and now I've maybe clued in on it with only 2 groups. It's really interesting, and maybe the concept might differ, of course, in context, but it's just fascinating to see that melding, in terms of the pacing of a song and the intended musical structure in regard to maybe the instrument choices, the pattern of the notes, to match that particular tone of what the sense of the lyrics should evoke in an emotional response. It's fascinating to me. And the song itself, generally, I really want to pick on that element, though, because that's something I've really heard and concentrated my attention on in recent listens. Like, this track has grown in so much respect on part of that one regard. But the entirety of the piece is quite interesting. Again, it's wrestling with that self-destructive emotional sense of dread that I'm sure, again, is a grounded emotion for many. And that emotional resonance is something, again, like I've said, is so dominant on this album universally from track to track. I have so much respect for this release, and it's been, like I said, such a great addition. The video, in other regards, I'm trying to decipher, and some music it's hard to do on a raw take in regards to analysis. Sometimes music requires further contemplation. This person in the video, I know it's not Ezra Miller, but it's a doppelganger. That's what I see. It's more than likely the Welsh version. I don't know, the British version. I don't know. Maybe it is Ezra Miller, and I don't know. I never heard the casting call. Anywho, aside from that, I'm not a spider person. Well, this is actually really interesting. Mimicking the self-destructive pattern, I'm not sure I'm right here. Anybody see the legs? They're like shot needles, or what people would use. I mean, they're, I guess, a bit larger than what I would see, but like they're maybe, if somebody's dealing with like a substance abuse disorder, or even if you're going to a doctor, this sort of looks like a medical needle that somebody's sticking in your arm. Put a drug in or something else, like an immunization needle. That's interesting. I mean, speaking about like self-harm or self-destructive tendencies, I wonder if that's perhaps maybe what it's meant to evoke, with a very gross insectoid body. Again, as I said, I'm not a spider person, and one's that gargantuan. Ugh. Anyway, gross. I'm moving on. The other two I didn't necessarily understand. And again, some music requires further contemplation. So if you're better at tracking maybe the sense of the video and where that's going, with the girl and the hooded figure, feel free to let me know what your interpretation was in the comments down below. Maybe you have wildly different interpretations than I do. You know, music is very unique and it can be interpreted differently. And the piece overall, like I said, is really great. And although, again, Stitches is my predominant favorite, this is a nice compliment. It's a beautiful second tier to that track in consideration of the deluxe editions. Now, I'm not a ranking guy. If I were, other than I know that Stitches is my favorite, if I were to go and judge the entire album, I mean, that's just, I'm not going to get into that because all the tracks have been great, but I'm like, I wouldn't know where to begin. And my ranking system, it shifts all the time. It's like on a whim. I have no consistency. So I'm like, I'm not even going to bother. But the album generally has been great to listen to. I absolutely love Bullet for My Valentine. I can't wait to hear more of them. And I do hope maybe in future focus, they evoke more of this emotional side with their music. Again, like I said, every track for me in part has resonated in some manner. And I think for a lot of people, like I said, you know, metal is very strong at this. And it's, again, part of the reason I gravitated to it in the beginning was because of that emotional connection that I didn't experience in my real life and still to some degree don't do it today. I don't have many connections in regards to music, which, you know, that's also been a great access point in regards to why I started covering music in the first place. It's been sort of a discovery on this channel that I've been able to communicate with other fans, perhaps with groups that I become interested in. And it's been great to form connections where in my real life, for the most part, not entirely, but like it's about maybe 98%, I don't have those connections. It's been great, though, to meet people who perhaps have similar interests, because I don't often feel that resonance, you know, in my day-to-day experiences, other than perhaps when I'm talking about music. And even just in passing, I'll get a comment or two from somebody that, you know, float in on occasion, and it's, you know, it's great to forge those relationships. Even if maybe they're digital ones, it's neat. I think anybody wants a feeling of commonality with others and to have that association. And I do admit, as I've said many times, my music puts me more in the space of being a bit of an anomaly or in an isolated space. I'm a big fan of this group. I've been for a long time. And for me, again, the way that they've been in my life, not just as, you know, on an entertainment perspective in regards to their music, it's highly engaging, but just in the way that Bullet for My Valentine has touched my life and their vision. I really have come to respect this group quite a bit. I'd love to hear if that's sort of the same energy that you experience when you listen to their works as well. I mean, that's certainly generally what I've said about this entire album. It's connected with me so much. It's a beautiful piece. But if you're a longtime fan, I'm sure, you know, that's probably the same sentiment. Or maybe if you're somebody who's just looking at this for a first impression, I would love to hear what your thoughts are on Bullet for My Valentine if this track inclines you to look deeper with their music. And I would consult their earlier library. Again, they got so many big hits. You'll love them, I'm sure, especially with this album. Let me know what your thoughts are on down the track if you so wish to disclose your perspective. Again, I find it quite to be a beautiful work. Going forward, as I said, if there's anything new from Bullet for My Valentine, I'm game to cover it. And in the future, I can say it, I've been making this tease on occasion in respect to their work. I have another channel evolving where Bullet for My Valentine will be able to probably be showcased in the interim. Though the channel is not ready to be launched yet, and I did have to push the release date, debut date back amid some technical stuff I'm still working on. I don't know yet when it's going to launch. I'm trying to move heaven and earth to get it started. It's called Symphonies and Small Talk. The link is open. You can subscribe if you want for whenever the channel does open its presence up to the public in terms of content. The channel's available right now. It's just I haven't uploaded anything. My vision is to take, because I love covering music, but I wanted to go even deeper with it. And these two channels are going to be interlinked between that one and this one, which is more governed around. I mean, this is a broader focus in terms of entertainment content, but this is more so in the territory of first impressions. Symphonies and Small Talk allows me to talk about established listens and tones or tunes I've known for a while and revered, or maybe artists I've long been favorites or a fan of. Bullet for My Valentine, I've listened to music again for so many years, and again, as I said, in part as penance, self-administered, but I'm glad I did this. I covered the entirety of the deluxe edition of what I could in terms of fresh listen, but I would love to be able to tell you my thoughts on songs in detail from the standard release. Symphonies and Small Talk in part will provide that for me. I'm actually very excited to utilize it for satisfying that particular goal of mine, because I've definitely wanted to give you, ideally, again, I would have covered it in terms of first impressions. I just wasn't making music a big event on this channel as much as I am now, or as much of a expenditure of my time and in terms of materializing a passion I've long had, that channel is going to provide me the window to do that. So if you're curious to hear some of my thoughts on some of their previously released work, consult that channel in the future whenever it releases. And I'll try to keep everybody apprised on this one in terms of when I'm seeing the date get closer in regards to when I debut content there. But I'm looking forward to talking about them in greater depth, as well as many other artists I've long been fans of in terms of their tracks or just the artists in general. This song is no exception. Again, like I said, in terms of my favorites on the album, it really is such a beautiful listen. And I do feel, again, like I said, in part it's because the structure of the piece to me is quite inventive. The song itself is beautiful, and the message in terms of its emotional respondents is great. I really feel like the song, like many on this album, is going to touch people. And probably even the video too. Even though the video to some parts is more abstract, it was a fun compliment, but the track in itself is just beautiful. It really is. And I hope you experience, if this was a first impression for you, that same joy that I feel every time I listen to Bullet for My Valentine. I really am a big fan of theirs. I've been for a while, and this album truly is one of my favorites of their lineup. It's been so great to return back to the origin days, I feel, of Bullet for My Valentine, and get back in touch with that rough side. And such a wonderful regard in terms of the emotional dimension to the music as well. They really are such a wonderful talent in the European scene that's touched many, I'm sure, including myself. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.